"Let go of me, Derek! You're drunk!" The words barely escaped Sarah's lips before her ex-husband's grip tightened around her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin like a vice. The elegant poolside party continued around them, the soft jazz music and clinking champagne glasses a stark contrast to the terror building in her chest. "You think you can just waltz back into town and pretend nothing happened?" Derek's voice was a low growl, his breath reeking of whiskey and rage. "You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone and just walk away?" Sarah tried to pull back, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd made the mistake of attending her friend Lisa's charity gala, thinking enough time had passed, thinking Derek would have moved on after their messy divorce 2 years ago. She should have known better. "Derek, please, people are watching." Sarah's voice trembled as she glanced around desperately. The other guests seemed oblivious to her struggle, lost in their own conversations and cocktails. The sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion loomed behind them, its warm, golden lights reflecting off the crystalline pool water. "Good, let them watch." Derek's grip shifted to her shoulders, and Sarah felt the edge of the pool behind her legs. The water lapped gently, innocently, just inches away. "You destroyed my reputation, Sarah. You took everything from me in that divorce. My house, my business contacts, my pride." "I only took what was fair after what you did to me," Sarah whispered, but her defiance only seemed to fuel his anger. "Fair?" Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. His face was flushed red, his usually perfectly styled blonde hair disheveled. "You want to talk about fair? How about we give these people something real to gossip about?" Before Sarah could react, Derek's hands moved to her throat. Not squeezing, not yet, but the threat was clear. Her breath caught as she realized how isolated they were on this side of the pool, hidden behind tall hedges and decorative columns. "You always were dramatic, Derek." Sarah tried to keep her voice steady, hoping someone, anyone, would notice. "Just like when you blamed me for your business failures, instead of admitting you were terrible with money." The words hit their mark. Derek's blue eyes flashed with fury, and Sarah immediately regretted her sharp tongue. She'd always been too quick with comebacks, too proud to back down. It was what had gotten her through their toxic marriage, but now it might get her killed. "You just don't know when to shut up, do you?" Derek's voice dropped to a whisper, and somehow that was more terrifying than his shouting. "Maybe a little water will cool off that smart mouth of yours." Sarah's eyes widened as she realized his intention. "Derek, no, you don't want to do this. Think about what you're—" Her words were cut off as Derek shoved her backward. Sarah's arms windmilled frantically as she felt herself falling, her silver heels slipping on the wet tile. The last thing she saw before hitting the water was Derek's twisted smile of satisfaction. The pool water was shockingly cold, closing over her head like a liquid tomb. Sarah's elegant black dress immediately became heavy, dragging her down as she struggled to surface. But before she could break through, she felt Derek's hands on her shoulders, pushing her down. Panic exploded in her chest as water filled her nose and mouth. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not like this. She clawed at Derek's arms, her perfectly manicured nails leaving scratches on his skin, but his grip only tightened. Through the distorted underwater world, she could see Derek's face above the surface, his expression cold and determined. This wasn't a crime of passion anymore. This was calculated. He really intended to kill her. Sarah's lungs burned as she fought against both the water and Derek's relentless pressure. Her vision began to darken around the edges, her movements becoming weaker. She thought of her daughter Emma, away at college, who would never know what really happened to her mother. She thought of all the things she'd never do, never say. Just as consciousness began to slip away, the pressure on her shoulders suddenly released. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her up through the water with swift, powerful movements. Sarah broke the surface, gasping and choking, water streaming from her hair and down her face. Through her blurred vision, she saw Derek backing away from the pool's edge, his face white with shock and fear. "You just messed up," a deep, dangerous voice said behind her. Sarah found herself being lifted effortlessly from the pool, cradled against a broad chest. She blinked water from her eyes and looked up to see the most striking man she'd ever encountered. Dark hair slicked back from the water, strong jawline set in hard lines, and the most intense brown eyes she'd ever seen. Eyes that promised retribution. "Are you all right?" His voice gentled as he looked down at her, and Sarah felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach despite her terror. I think so," she managed, still coughing up pool water. Her rescuer set her down carefully on a lounge chair, then turned his attention to Derek. "You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why you just tried to murder this woman," the stranger said, his voice carrying an authority that made Sarah's skin prickle with awareness. Derek, who had always been a bully when he thought he had the upper hand, seemed to shrink under this man's gaze. "This is none of your business, pal. This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Sarah corrected weakly, pulling the stranger's suit jacket tighter around her shoulders. She hadn't even noticed him putting it on her. "Ex-wife," the man repeated, his eyes never leaving Derek's face, "which means you have no claim on her whatsoever. What you just did was attempted murder." "Look, I don't know who you think you are," Derek started, trying to summon his usual bluster. "Marcus Romano," the man said simply, and Sarah felt Derek's whole body go rigid beside the pool. The name hit Sarah like another wave. Everyone in the city knew the Romano name, whispered in boardrooms and back alleys alike. They owned half the legitimate businesses in town, and if rumors were true, quite a few illegitimate ones as well. Marcus Romano was the eldest son, the heir apparent to an empire built on power and fear. "Mr. Romano," Derek's voice cracked as he spoke. "I didn't realize, I wasn't thinking clearly. Too much to drink, you know how it is." Marcus took a step closer to Derek, and Sarah noticed how everyone else at the party had gone quiet. The jazz music still played, but conversations had stopped. People were watching now, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "No, I don't know how it is," Marcus said conversationally. "I've never been so drunk that I tried to drown a defenseless woman. Must be a special kind of drunk." Sarah watched Derek sweat, literally watched beads of perspiration form on his forehead despite the cool evening air. She should have been terrified too. Marcus Romano was just as dangerous as Derek, probably more so. But instead of fear, she felt safe, protected. "It won't happen again," Derek said quickly. "I'll leave town. You won't see me again." "Oh, I know it won't happen again," Marcus agreed. "Because if I ever hear that you've so much as looked at this woman the wrong way, if you've sent her a text message or driven past her house or breathed in her direction, I will personally make sure you regret it for the rest of your very short life." The threat was delivered so casually, like he was discussing the weather, but there was steel beneath the silk. Derek nodded frantically, backing toward the house. "Can I go?" "I understand. Message received." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You can go. But Derek?" He waited until the trembling man looked back. "If I were you, I'd start running now." Derek didn't need to be told twice. He practically sprinted toward the house, shoving past other party guests in his haste to escape. Sarah watched him go, then looked up at Marcus, who had turned his attention back to her. Without the immediate threat of Derek, she became acutely aware of her appearance. Her hair was a soaked mess, her makeup had to be running down her face, and her dress was clinging uncomfortably to her skin. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't—" "Don't think about it," Marcus said, settling into the lounge chair beside her. "Are you hurt? Do you need to go to a hospital?" Sarah shook her head. "Just shaken up. I can't believe he actually tried to—" She trailed off, the reality of what had almost happened hitting her again. "Hey." Marcus's voice was gentle, and she felt his fingers under her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "You're safe now. He'll never touch you." "Again." There was something in his tone, an absolute certainty, that made Sarah believe him completely. She studied his face in the soft party lighting. He was probably in his early 40s, with the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from a life of challenges rather than just good genetics. There were small scars on his hands, laugh lines around his eyes, and a slight crookedness to his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once. "I'm Sarah," she said suddenly, realizing they hadn't been properly introduced. "I know," Marcus smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "Sarah Chen. You used to be Sarah Morrison before the divorce. You run the art gallery downtown. You have a daughter at Northwestern studying journalism." Sarah's eyes widened. "How do you—" "It's my business to know things," Marcus said simply, "especially about interesting people." "And I'm interesting?" "You're the most interesting woman here," Marcus said, his gaze holding hers. "Even soaking wet and traumatized, you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks, and she looked down at her hands. At 47, she wasn't used to such direct compliments, especially from men who looked like Marcus Romano. Her marriage to Derek had worn down her confidence over the years, made her feel invisible and unwanted. "I must look terrible," she murmured. "You look like a survivor," Marcus said firmly. "And trust me, that's the most attractive thing in the world." Around them, the party was slowly returning to normal. The other guests had apparently decided that the drama was over and had returned to their conversations, though Sarah caught several curious glances in their direction. "I should probably go home," Sarah said, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Get out of these wet clothes. Try to process what just happened." "Let me drive you," Marcus offered immediately. Sarah hesitated. Getting into a car with Marcus Romano was probably just as dangerous as staying at the party with Derek, just in a different way. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw only genuine concern and protective instincts. "I don't want to impose. You were enjoying the party." Marcus laughed, a rich sound that sent warmth through Sarah's chest. "Trust me, I wasn't enjoying this party. Charity galas aren't exactly my scene. I only came because Lisa's husband owes me a favor." "What is your scene?" Sarah found herself asking. Marcus stood and offered her his hand. "Let me take you home, and maybe we can figure that out together." Against every rational thought in her head, Sarah took his hand and let him help her to her feet. His fingers were warm and strong, and she felt that same flutter in her stomach when he didn't immediately let go. They walked through the party together, Marcus's hand on the small of her back, guiding her protectively through the crowd. Sarah was intensely aware of the stares they were receiving. Marcus Romano didn't attend social events often, and he certainly didn't leave them early with mysterious women. The valet brought around a sleek black Porsche, and Marcus held the door open for her like a perfect gentleman. The interior smelled like expensive leather and his cologne, something woody and masculine that made Sarah's head spin. "Where do you live?" Marcus asked as they pulled away from the mansion. Sarah gave him her address in the historic district, then settled back into the plush seat. The adrenaline from her encounter with Derek was finally wearing off, leaving her feeling shaky and vulnerable. "Are you cold?" Marcus noticed her trembling and immediately adjusted the car's temperature. "A little," Sarah admitted. "It's more the shock, I think." "Derek won't bother you again," Marcus said with quiet conviction. "I meant what I said back there." "I believe you," Sarah said, and she did. "But I have to ask, why did you help me? You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the steering wheel as they navigated the quiet city streets. "My father used to beat my mother," he said finally. "Every time he'd had too much to drink. Every time business wasn't going well. Every time she said something he didn't like." Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't expected such a personal revelation. "She never fought back, never left him, never asked for help," Marcus continued. "She just endured it because she thought she had to, because she thought no one would care enough to stop it." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "She died when I was 25, Marcus said. "Heart attack," the doctor said, but I knew better. Years of stress and fear had worn her down until there was nothing left. He glanced over at Sarah. "So, when I see a man putting his hands on a woman, When I see that look of terror in her eyes, I can't walk away. They had reached Sarah's neighborhood, a quiet street lined with Victorian houses and old oak trees. Marcus pulled into her driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of them moved to get out. "Your mother would be proud of you," Sarah said, "for the man you've become." "Would she?" Marcus asked. "I'm not exactly a choir boy, Sarah. You know who I am, what my family does." "I know you saved my life tonight," Sarah said firmly. "I know you treated me with kindness and respect when you had no reason to. I know you could have walked away and chosen not to get involved, but you didn't." Marcus turned in his seat to face her fully. "What if I told you I wanted to get involved? Not just tonight, but more than that?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "I'd say that's impossible. We live in completely different worlds." "Do we?" Marcus asked. "We're both business owners in the same city. We're both survivors of difficult pasts. We both know what it's like to have to be strong when everything inside us wants to break." He reached out and tucked a strand of her now dry hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I've been watching you for months, Sarah, coming into your gallery, buying pieces I didn't need just to have an excuse to talk to you." Sarah's eyes widened. "That was you, the anonymous collector who bought the Morrison landscape series." "Guilty," Marcus smiled. "Though I have to say, your taste in artists is excellent. The paintings look perfect in my study." "I can't believe," Sarah shook her head. "All those times you came in, you were so charming and funny. I never connected you to the Romano family." "Because that's not who I am when I'm with you," Marcus said seriously. "When I'm in your gallery talking about art and laughing at your stories about difficult customers, I'm just Marcus. Not the heir to an empire, not the man people fear. Just me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. After years of Derek making her feel small and insignificant, Marcus made her feel like she was worth something. Worth protecting, worth pursuing, worth saving. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted. What happened tonight brought back a lot of bad memories. I'm not sure I'm in a place where I can trust my judgment about men." "Then don't trust your judgment," Marcus said gently. "Trust your instincts. What are they telling you right now?" Sarah looked into his eyes, those intense brown eyes that had promised retribution for Derek, but showed her only tenderness. Her instincts were screaming that Marcus Romano was dangerous, that getting involved with him would turn her quiet life upside down. But they were also telling her that he would never hurt her, that he would protect her with his life, that he saw something in her worth fighting for. "They're telling me to invite you in for coffee," she said quietly. Marcus smiled that transformative smile again. "I'd like that very much." Sarah's house was a restored Victorian she'd bought with her divorce settlement, painted sage green with white trim and a wraparound porch. She'd spent 2 years making it into a sanctuary, a place where she felt safe and at peace. "It's beautiful," Marcus said as she unlocked the front door. "It suits you." "Thank you." Sarah led him into the living room, suddenly nervous. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a man in her house, certainly not one who made her pulse race just by walking behind her. "I'll make that coffee," she said, needing a moment to collect herself. "Sarah." Marcus caught her hand as she moved toward the kitchen. "We don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. I can drink coffee and leave, or I can just leave now if that would be better." The consideration in his voice, the way he put her comfort above his own desires, made Sarah's heart clench. "Stay," she said. "Please." In the kitchen, Sarah busied herself with the coffee maker while Marcus examined the photographs on her refrigerator. Pictures of Emma at various ages, Sarah at gallery openings, trips they'd taken together. "She looks like you," Marcus said, pointing to a recent photo of Emma at her college graduation. "Everyone says that," Sarah smiled. "She's got her father's stubborn streak, though." "Not Derek?" "No, Emma's father died when she was 3, Sarah explained. "Derek was my second husband. My mistake husband, I call him." Marcus leaned against the counter, watching her measure coffee grounds. "How long were you married to him?" 5 years too long." Sarah said ruefully. I knew it was wrong from the beginning, but I convinced myself Emma needed a father figure. Instead, she got front row seats to watch her mother being slowly destroyed by a narcissistic control freak. Is that why you divorced him? Sarah was quiet for a moment, focusing on the familiar ritual of making coffee. Derek never hit me, she said finally, but he had other ways of making me feel worthless. He'd criticize everything I did, isolate me from my friends, make me doubt my own perceptions of reality. By the end, I barely recognized myself. What changed? Marcus asked gently. Emma came home from school one day and found me crying in the kitchen, Sarah said. She was 15, and she looked at me with these wise eyes and said, Mom, you know this isn't normal, right? You know you deserve better than this? Sarah poured the coffee into 2 mugs, her hands steady despite the emotional weight of the memories. That night, I started planning my exit strategy. It took me another year to get the courage to actually leave, but Emma's words gave me the strength to start fighting back. Smart girl, Marcus said, accepting his coffee. The smartest, Sarah agreed. She's studying journalism because she wants to give voice to people who can't speak for themselves. I think watching what I went through shaped her sense of justice. They moved back to the living room, settling on opposite ends of Sarah's comfortable sofa. The silence between them was comfortable, charged with possibility but not pressure. What about you? Sarah asked. Ever been married? Came close once, Marcus admitted. Her name was Victoria. We were engaged for 2 years. What happened? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. She wanted me to choose between her and the family business. She couldn't handle the uncertainty, the danger, the way people looked at her when they found out who she was dating. And you chose the business? I chose duty, Marcus said. My father was sick, my younger brothers weren't ready to take over, and walking away would have meant letting down hundreds of people who depended on us for their livelihoods. He looked up at Sarah. I regretted it for years, wondered if I'd made the right choice. And now? Now I think maybe I was saved from making a bigger mistake, Marcus said. Victoria loved the idea of me, the excitement and danger and wealth. But she never really saw me, never understood what drove me or what I actually cared about. Sarah felt a flutter of something that might have been jealousy. What do you care about? Family, loyalty, protecting people who can't protect themselves, Marcus said immediately. Building something that lasts, something meaningful. Art, beauty, culture. He smiled at her. Smart women who run art galleries and raise incredible daughters and somehow manage to maintain their grace and kindness, even after being married to complete jerks. Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks again. You don't know me well enough to say that. Don't I? Marcus shifted closer to her on the sofa. I know you give free art classes to kids from the community center every Saturday morning. I know you donated 3 paintings to the hospital's children's ward last month. I know you personally drove supplies to the women's shelter after that fire in February. Sarah stared at him. How could you possibly know all that? Because I've been falling in love with you for months, Marcus said simply, and when you're falling in love with someone, you pay attention. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed what he'd just said. Marcus, she started, but he held up a hand. I know it's too soon to say that, he said. I know tonight has been traumatic, and you need time to process everything. I'm not asking you to say it back or make any decisions right now. Then what are you asking? Marcus reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. I'm asking for a chance. I'm asking you to let me take you to dinner tomorrow night, somewhere quiet where we can talk without poolside attempted murders interrupting us. Sarah laughed despite everything, the sound surprising them both. Is that what usually happens on your dates? Attempted murders? Only the really good ones, Marcus grinned. Sarah looked down at their joined hands. His were so much larger than hers, scarred and strong, but his touch was infinitely gentle. She thought about Derek's hands, how they'd felt like manacles around her wrists, how they'd pushed her down into that dark water. Then she thought about Marcus's hands, how they'd lifted her to safety, how they'd wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. "One dinner," she said finally. "One dinner," Marcus agreed. "Somewhere public," Sarah added. "The most public place you want. And if I decide this is too complicated, too dangerous, you'll respect that?" Marcus lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Sarah, if you decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll disappear from your life completely. No pressure, no persistence, no showing up at your gallery with transparent excuses to buy art." "Okay," Sarah said softly. "One dinner." Marcus smiled, and Sarah felt something tight in her chest loosen for the first time in years. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe she did deserve better than what Derek had given her. Maybe she deserved someone who saw her worth, who would dive into dark water to save her, who would spend months falling in love with her kindness before he ever had the chance to know her heart. "I should let you get some rest," Marcus said, setting down his coffee cup. "It's been a long night." He was right, but Sarah found herself reluctant to let him leave. The house would feel too quiet, too empty, and she'd be alone with her thoughts and the memory of Derek's hands around her throat. Would you mind staying a little longer?" she asked hesitantly. "I don't really want to be alone right now." "Of course," Marcus said immediately. "We could watch a movie or just talk, or I could sit here while you fall asleep on the other end of the couch. Whatever you need." "A movie sounds good," Sarah said gratefully. She found a romantic comedy on Netflix, something light and familiar that wouldn't require much attention. They settled back on the sofa, and gradually as the movie played, Sarah found herself relaxing. Marcus kept up a quiet commentary that made her laugh, and slowly she let herself lean closer to his warmth. By the time the credits rolled, Sarah's head was resting on Marcus's shoulder, and she was more comfortable than she'd been in months. She could feel the steady rise and fall of his chest, smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of chlorine from his impromptu dive into the pool. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For saving me, for staying, for making me feel safe." "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice rumbling in his chest, "for trusting me enough to let me stay." Sarah tilted her head up to look at him, and found his brown eyes watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. There was desire there, yes, but also tenderness and protectiveness, and something deeper that made her feel precious. "Marcus," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. "I know," he said softly, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I feel it too." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, to change her mind, to remember all the reasons this was complicated and dangerous. Instead, Sarah met him halfway, her eyes fluttering closed as their lips touched. The kiss was soft and gentle, a question rather than a demand. Marcus tasted like coffee and possibility, and Sarah felt something she'd thought was dead forever stirring back to life in her chest. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "That was," she started. "Perfect," Marcus finished. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Sarah felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into something that would change her life forever. "I should go," Marcus said reluctantly. "Let you get some sleep." Sarah nodded, though part of her wanted to ask him to stay the night, just to keep holding her and making her feel safe. But that was too much, too fast, and they both knew it. At the front door, Marcus paused with his hand on the doorknob. "I'll pick you up tomorrow at 7, if that works for you." 7 is perfect, Sarah said. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gentle benediction that made Sarah's heart flutter. "Lock the door behind me," he said. "And Sarah? If Derek or anyone else bothers you, if you feel unsafe for any reason, you call me immediately." He handed her a business card with his personal number written on the back. Sarah clutched it like a lifeline. "I will," she promised. After Marcus left, Sarah locked the door and leaned against it, pressing her fingers to her lips where she could still feel the ghost of his kiss. In one night, her entire world had shifted. Derek had tried to destroy her, but instead, he'd inadvertently led her to the man who might just save her. The next evening, Sarah spent an hour getting ready for dinner, trying on 3 different dresses before settling on a navy blue wrap dress that made her feel elegant and confident. When Marcus arrived precisely at 7, the look in his eyes told her she'd chosen well. "You're stunning," he said, offering her his arm. He took her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in the Arts District, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles that managed to be romantic without being pretentious. The owner, a jovial man named Giuseppe, greeted Marcus like family and made a point of telling Sarah she was the most beautiful woman who'd ever graced his establishment. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Sarah told him about her art gallery, about the struggling artists she tried to support, and the wealthy collectors who sometimes bought pieces just to have something to brag about. Marcus told her about the legitimate side of his family's business empire, about the restaurants and construction companies and real estate developments that employed hundreds of people. "Do you ever wish you could do something else?" Sarah asked over dessert. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "When I was younger, I wanted to be an architect. I loved the idea of designing buildings that would outlast me, creating something beautiful and functional that would serve people for generations." "What stopped you?" "Duty," Marcus said simply. "My father needed me. The family needed me. Sometimes we don't get to choose our paths." "But you still could," Sarah said impulsively. "You could study architecture now, design buildings as a side project. It's never too late to pursue something you're passionate about." Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "Is that what you did, with the gallery?" "In a way," Sarah nodded. "I always loved art, but when Emma was little, I put my dreams on hold to be a full-time mom. After the divorce, I realized I had a chance to start over, to build something that was entirely mine." "And you built something beautiful," Marcus said, "like everything else you touch." After dinner, Marcus walked her slowly back to his car, their hands intertwined. Sarah found herself reluctant for the evening to end. She felt more like herself than she had in years, witty and interesting and desired. "Would you like to see my house?" Marcus asked as they sat in her driveway. "I promise I'm not trying to seduce you. I'd like to show you those paintings I bought. Let you see how they look in their new home." Sarah knew she should say no. Going to Marcus Romano's house was crossing a line, entering his world in a way that would be difficult to come back from. But she also knew she wasn't ready to say goodnight. "I'd like that," she said. Marcus lived in a sprawling colonial mansion on the outskirts of the city, set back from the road by a long, tree-lined driveway. The house was elegant without being ostentatious, clearly expensive, but tasteful. "It's beautiful," Sarah said as they walked up to the front door. "It's too big for one person," Marcus admitted, "but I keep hoping someday I'll have a reason to fill it." Inside, the house was decorated with the kind of understated luxury that spoke of old money and good taste. The paintings Sarah recognized from her gallery were prominently displayed in Marcus's study, perfectly lit and clearly treasured. "They look perfect here," she said, genuinely pleased to see her curated pieces so well cared for. "They remind me of you," Marcus said, coming to stand behind her. "Every time I look at them, I think about watching you work in the gallery, how your face lights up when you talk about a piece you love." Sarah turned in his arms, her heart racing at their proximity. "Marcus, I know this is moving fast," he said, his hands settling on her waist. "I know you have every reason to be cautious. But Sarah, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." "How do you feel about me?" she asked breathlessly. "Like I would move mountains to make you smile," Marcus said. "Like I would burn down the world to keep you safe. Like everything I've done in my life has been leading me to that moment last night when I saw you in trouble and knew I'd do anything to protect you." Sarah's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such raw honesty and intensity. Derek had never made her feel precious or protected. He'd made her feel like a burden, a disappointment, something to be tolerated rather than cherished. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of me?" "Of this," Sarah said, gesturing between them. "Of how you make me feel. I've spent 2 years learning how to be alone, how to be independent. And now you come along and make me want to lean on someone again." Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Then lean on me, he said simply. I promise I won't let you fall. This time, when he kissed her, it wasn't gentle or questioning. It was claiming and possessive and full of months of restrained desire. Sarah melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body coming alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said quietly. Stay with me tonight. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw her future there, complicated and uncertain, but full of passion and protection, and the kind of love she'd stopped believing existed. She thought about Derek, about the way he'd made her feel small and worthless. Then she thought about Marcus, who saw her strength and celebrated it, who had literally dove into dark water to save her life. Yes, she whispered. Marcus's bedroom was a study in masculine elegance, all dark wood and rich fabrics. But Sarah barely noticed the decor, because Marcus was kissing her again, his hands tangling in her hair, making her feel beautiful and desired and absolutely precious. They made love with a tenderness that brought tears to Sarah's eyes, Marcus worshipping her body like she was something sacred, something worth treasuring. Afterward, as she lay in his arms listening to his heartbeat, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. No regrets? Marcus asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. None, Sarah said, and meant it. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her art gallery wearing a white dress and holding a bouquet of white roses. The space had been transformed with flowers and candles, filled with friends and family who had come to witness something no one had expected: Sarah Chen marrying Marcus Romano. Emma had flown in from Chicago, gorgeous in navy blue and beaming with happiness for her mother. Even Giuseppe had closed his restaurant for the evening to cater the reception. You clean up nice, Romano, Sarah said as Marcus took her hand for their first dance. You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen, Marcus said, spinning her slowly among the paintings and sculptures that had brought them together. Even more beautiful than Victoria? Sarah teased. Victoria who? Marcus grinned, pulling her closer. As they danced, Sarah caught sight of a news report playing silently on someone's phone. Derek Morrison had been found dead in his apartment in Las Vegas, apparently the victim of a gambling debt gone wrong. Sarah felt nothing but a mild sense of closure. Did you? She started to ask Marcus. I told you he'd never bother you again, Marcus said simply. Some promises you keep yourself, some you delegate. Sarah knew she should be horrified, should feel some moral outrage at the casual elimination of her ex-husband. Instead, she felt only gratitude that she would never have to look over her shoulder again, never have to worry about Derek showing up drunk and violent in her life. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For diving in, Sarah said. For saving me in every way a person can be. Saved. Marcus spun her again, and Sarah laughed with pure joy. She'd thought her life was ending that night by the pool, but instead it had just been beginning. My mom says I can't hit 1,000 subscribers, so please prove her wrong and subscribe. Thank you for watching.